Exactly.
Anyway, let's talk Aaron Rodgers. The guy went down early in the game. Hard hit. Although I did not think a particularly dirty hit, but it was a big hit. You got a big guy that slams you into the ground on your shoulder. Certainly if that happened to me, I would break a collarbone. And if it stopped there, I'd be lucky. Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone. I believe he broke a collarbone a couple of years ago, didn't he?
He might have. All I know is this one's definitely going to require surgery. That came out, and it's very likely he's going to miss the rest of the season. So he's going to be done for the year, which means you're scrambling for backup plans. If you owned Rodgers, you probably didn't have a backup quarterback. That's one of the benefits of owning a true locked-in QB1 like him. So you're going straight to the waivers. Luckily, though, quarterbacks of all those positions that we've gotten hit with, David Johnson, Dalvin Cook, Odell Beckham, where you start multiple position, players at those, it's a lot easier to replace a quarterback. We've always said it's a streamable position. We always have options every week in the stream team by our guy Red Soccer 45. Also, my waiver article every week has some streamers to look at too. And this week, I'm obviously going to be focused on quarterback help. And I think there's some decent options out there. So first, you just want to check, is Andrew Luck out there? I know he's still probably not going to be active for another week or two, but that's a guy who, if you can get through 2 more weeks, could be a legitimate QB1 the rest of the way. So he's out there in 40% of leagues or so. Double check that Andrew Luck's not out there, and if so, stash him on the bench. But then you got to get a starter. I would look at Tyrod Taylor first. 37% owned right now, so out there in plenty of leagues. And his schedule is a complete joke. Doesn't face a single top half defense the rest of the year in terms of passing defense. It's Tampa Bay this week, 5th against it. Gets 2 matchups against New England, who are the worst matchup against the pass. So they're surrendering the most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. Kansas City giving up surprisingly the 6th most. Indianapolis giving up the 2nd most points. And then every other matchup, you got New Orleans, the Jets. Like the threatening matchups are the Chargers and Dolphins, which really aren't that threatening. So I know his weapon cabinet is completely barren, but this is a guy that was already relying on his legs for the most of his value. He did it last year, was a top 10 QB, I think QB 8 last year, despite Sammy Watkins being out all year. So very few weapons last year and still got it done. Coming out of the bye week, you imagine they're going to be a very run-heavy team coming out of that, kind of make it a college-esque offense, which is going to be 6-7 dialed-up runs for Taylor each week. I think he's going to get it done on the ground, have a good shot at a ground score against these pathetic defenses every week, and just be a very viable QB streamer for the majority of the rest of the season. So if you need a season-long replacement, Tyrod Taylor is where I'm looking first.
Now, you take Taylor as a replacement for Rodgers. I agree he is a viable fill-in. But you're taking like a 10-point hit probably in your starting lineup.
Oh, definitely.
With that replacement.
You're taking that.
This is taking it on the chin big time.
Yeah, there's no replacing. It's just similar to we've talked about with all these other guys. And we have this type of segment every single week on the podcast, it seems, is replacing Dalvin Cook, replacing Odell Beckham, whatever it is. It's been brutal, like we said in the intro. You're not replacing the guy. Obviously, you're not finding an Aaron Rodgers type of talent on the waiver wire. It's more about streaming and scrambling and finding the right matchups, which is certainly possible. Tyrod Taylor is one of the best long-term options. Similarly, Andy Dalton, he's 46% owned, so maybe not out there in every league. But since Bill Lazor took over, he's averaged 19.3 fantasy points per contest. I know you're a favorite of Bill Lazor. You love
Bill Lazor.
Love Bill Lazor. So he's out there. Unfortunately, his schedule is not quite as appetizing, and Dalton's been very prone to blowing up in the right games when he has an easy matchup, but also just getting completely destroyed in the wrong matchups. And when I look at his schedule over the next 6 weeks, it's a real just complete black and white in terms of he's got either an absolute gem of a matchup or an absolute awful matchup. So if you're picking up Dalton, it's really going to be as a committee situation. Next week he gets Pittsburgh, or coming up this week, gets Pittsburgh, 31st most points to quarterback, so 2nd worst. You're not putting him in there. He's going to get destroyed. You don't want to trust the red rifle there. But then he gets Indianapolis, again, 2nd most points, followed by Jacksonville, giving up the 32nd most points, so the hardest matchup for quarterbacks. But then Tennessee, 3rd most. Then Denver, obviously a great passing defense, followed by Cleveland, 4th most, who he put up nearly 30 points against. So over these next 6 weeks, it's really Bench him, start him. Bench him, start him. So you need a committee to go with it, but there's plenty of streamers to go with Dalton coming up this week. So if you're desperate, and let's say you lost Winston, and we'll talk about that injury in a second, and you only need a 1 week fill-in, or you have Deshaun Watson or Matt Stafford on bye, there's certainly other options. And I do want to just quickly mention Jared Goff and Trevor Siemian, 38% and 42% owned respectively. So those guys are also out there in leagues as potential long-term replacements, particularly Goff, who was engineering the top scoring offense through 4 weeks. I like him. He's crashed back to earth. He's had 2 really hard matchups with single-digit performances over the last 2. But at the end of the day, his schedule looks pretty ripe. 7 of the last 9 contests from week 7 through 16 are going to come against bottom-half defenses, a few really juicy matchups. You'll bench him when he faces Minnesota and Seattle again, but he could be a long-term option. But back to streamers. I know I'm going pretty quick here, but I know we're a little short on time. Blake Bortles, whoever thought I'd recommend him when he's not playing in London, but he's facing Indianapolis. Like I mentioned, again, second most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. So Bortles, a potential streamer this week, 14% owned. Brett Hundley, I know in the rundown you said you're never going to worry about starting another Green Bay quarterback, but Brett Hundley does get the Saints this week, gets another week to kind of prepare as the starter, not getting thrown into the fire unexpectedly. He gets a bad defense with New Orleans. He's got pretty solid rushing ability. I think Brett Hundley makes a decent streamer in this matchup. The rest of his schedule this year is horrible, so I'm not looking at Hundley as a season-long replacement. But against New Orleans, maybe why not? And then the guy I love to pronounce, and I know this isn't his name, but CJ Beathard. I'm going to just call him Beathard the rest of the year because he just loves to beat it hard. Owned in 1% of leagues. So if you need somebody, he's facing that inexperienced secondary of Dallas, the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Threw for 245 in fill-in duty and just moved the offense a lot better. Almost engineered a comeback win against the Redskins. So the guy seemed a lot more competent than Brian Hoyer has all year. Those are 3 just streamers. If you just want 1 week, you don't want to throw in 20 fantasy dollars to get Tyrod Taylor or 15 to get Andy Dalton, but you want a 1 week bye week stopgap. Those 3 names are guys you could potentially roll out.